At the foundation of every solid coaching relationship is a very solid coaching agreement. This is ICF competency number 2. And out of the 11 core competencies, this is kind of the first one that's being measured with the ICF markers. And we'll talk a bit about the ICF markers around the establishing or creating the coaching agreement in another video. But this video is looking at why does it matter? What's meant by the coaching agreement? How does it come into play throughout a coaching relationship? So when a coach begins working with an individual, it has to be very clearly established what this relationship is about, how it's going to work, and there has to be partnership and agreement around those expectations. Otherwise, the relationship's going to fall apart. The journey, the challenge, the provocation that a coach kind of offers has to be bought into by the person who's being coached. Otherwise, the coach is kind of going to be pushing the coach's own agenda on the individual. So having a very well-established, co-created coaching agenda, or agreement, I should say, is at the foundation of every coaching relationship. Now, if you imagine like a 6-month coaching agreement, there's going to be 3 primary types of miniature agreements or portions of that agreement throughout the relationship. So at first, you have a contract, and that contract is oftentimes facilitated through some sort of sales process and marketing process. And like the ICF highlights in their content, your marketing is the beginning of your coaching. The way your website appears, the way you talk about coaching, what you guarantee an individual as part of the experience working with you as a coach. These are all part of establishing the coaching agreement. We want to make sure they're very clear. Their eyes are wide open to what is coaching and how is our relationship going to work? Are you going to be my friend? Are you going to be my mentor? Are you going to be someone who's going to give me advice, a consultant to me, my therapist? No, I'm going to be your coach, and let's talk about what that is. And that harkens back to the idea of, what is coaching as a primary topic of this entire training. But the partnership starts with the contract and the sales and marketing that precede the contract. Beyond the contract, you begin facilitating the overarching agreement, the relationship as a whole. If it's going to last 6 months, what's that relationship going to be about? And there's some things that we can talk about in another video to help establish the overarching agreement, because that's going to be a very core part of the expectations that are set. So you have contract, the overall arrangement, establishing the agreement as in a long-term scope, you might say. And then thirdly, you have each session will have its own agenda or session agreement. And that session agreement is going to also be a way to check in, to clarify what is like the next step in the journey as we reflect on what our arrangement was about at the beginning with the contract, what we talked about you wanting to have by the end of our relationship. So we looked at the overall relationship. Now, as we step into this session, what's going to be the next leg of the journey? And at each of these points, contract, overall agreement of the relationship, and each session agreement, there has to be partnership and a co-creation of the expectations and outcomes that the client's going to be looking for. The coach is not an expert on what the agreements should be. Maybe a bit of an expert on the contract. The contract part is a little bit more of the knowledge. You need to know a good contract, what it looks like in your state, and I can give you some examples. But honestly, you need to make sure your contract is solid on your side. There's so many factors that go into play with that. You think about a global scale of all the different types of things that can come into play with the contract. You need to make sure you are an expert on your contract. But when it comes to the relationship you have with this person who is hiring you or whose company has hired you to be their coach, you are not an expert as their coach. You're not an expert on what their agenda should be, what their agreement, coaching focus should be. Instead, you are an expert in helping them unfold, unpack, and understand what that agreement ought to be. It's truly, at the core, foundational to what the coaching approach is all about. It sounds wonderful, doesn't it? It actually sounds like you don't have to do that much work. Great. It's a bit more complicated. It's a bit more complicated. And when I first started coaching, this thought overwhelmed me at first. Like, oh, yeah, wonderful. I'd love to make the other person that I'm coaching decide exactly what they want out of each session. And as I studied up and then got into the field, I kept having these students, these professionals say, I don't know. They get into a session, especially sponsored clients, get into a session and say, I don't know. What do you think? Coaching around the I don't knows is really important. It's a true skill that needs to be practiced. The ability to handle ambiguity in the agreement is very important as well. Many people are seeking a coach because they're not exactly sure what they want, and they need someone to ask good questions that help them unpack and discover what their professional development journey should look like. But at the end of the day, again, it is not that the coach knows what that journey should be. Instead, the coach is skilled in helping this individual discover what that journey should be. So we'll talk with a few extra videos on those skills. I mean, the agenda setting, the coaching agreement work is a core part of the overall training. So we'll come back at this and hammer it all throughout the training, because with the right coaching agreement, the coach relationship is very strong, and each session is very impactful and meaningful. Without a good coaching agreement, without co-creating that good coaching agreement, then the relationship will fall apart, and each session will feel like a huge amount of labor on the coach's side as they're trying to drag this person along the journey that the coach is having to take responsibility for. More on that thought in a future video, but it is a lot more work to try to do it on your own. The expert in the room is the client. They know what their needs are in their professional journey. We just need to help them unpack and discover those things. I hope this is stimulating. It probably isn't yet helpful. It sets the stage for some other videos where we are going to be looking at the overall agreement, how to cultivate a session agreement. We're going to be looking at how to review a relationship as you're going into it, maybe 2-3 months into the coaching relationship, how to check in on things and revise the overall agreement, and all of that good stuff, how to coach the I don't knows. So we will get to how to do the agenda setting throughout a coaching engagement. But for now, I hope this helps establish the foundation of what a coaching agreement is all about.